Nothing else could, of course, be suggested, so leaving the others, Thorin and Philly and Killy, the hobbit went along the shore to Great Bridge. They were guards at the along at the head of it, but they were not keeping very careful watch, for it was so long since there had been any real need. Except for occasional squabbles about river tolls, they were friends. With the wood elves, other folks were far away, and some of the younger people in the town openly doubted the existence of any dragon in the mountain, and laughed at the greybeards and gammers who said that they had seen him flying in the sky in their young days. That being so, it is not surprising that guards were drinking and laughing by the fire in their hut, and did not hear the noise of the unpacking of the dwarves or the footsteps of our 4 scouts. Their astonished was enormous when Thorin Oakeshield stepped in through the door. "Who are you and what do you want?" they shouted, leaping to their feet and groping for weapons. "Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain," said the dwarf in a loud voice, and he looked at it in spite of his torn clothes and dragged hood. The gold gleamed on his neck and waist. His eyes were dark and deep. "I have come back. I wish to see the master of your town." Then there was a tremendous excitement. Some of the more foolish ran out of the hut as if they expected the mountain to be go golden in the night, and all the waters of the lake turned yellow right away. The captain of the guards came forward, and "Who are these?" he asked, pointing to Philly and Killy. Said Bilbo. "The sons of the fighters' daughters," asked Thorin. "Philly and Killy of the race of Durin and Baggins, who has travelled with us on of the west. If you come in peace, lay down your arms," said the captain. "We have none," said Thorin, and it was true enough. Their knives had both been taken from the wood elves, and the great sword of Orcus too. Bilbo had his short sword hidden as usual, but he said nothing about that. "We have no need of weapons. We will return at last to our town spoken of old. Nor could we fight against so many. Take us to your master. He is a feast," said the captain. "Then all the more reason for taking us to him," burst in Philly, who was getting impatient of these solemnities. "We have worn and famished after our long road, and we have sick comrades. Now make haste, let us have no more words of your master may have something to say to you." "Follow me then," said the captain, and with 6 men about them he led over the bridge through the gates and into the marketplace of the town. This was a wide circle of quiet water surrounded by the tall piles on which were built the great power houses, and by long wooden quays with many steps and ladders going down to the surface of the lake. From one great hall shone many lights, and there came the sound of merry voices. They passed its door and stood blinking in the light, looking at the long tables filled with folk. "I'm Thorin, son of Sarin, and son of Thror, king under the mountain. I return," cried Thorin in a loud voice from the door. Before the captain could say anything, all leaped to the master of the town sprang from his great chair, but none rose in greater surprise than the raftsmen of the elves, who were sitting at the lower end of the hall. Pressing forward before the master's table, they cried, "These are prisoners of our king. They have escaped. Wandering vagabond dwarves, they could not give any good accounts of themselves, sneaking through the woods and molesting our people." Is this true?" asked the master. As a matter of fact, he thought it far more like that the return of the king under the mountains, if any such person had any exist. "It is true. We were wrongfully waylaid by the even king and imprisoned without cause as we journeyed back to our own land," asked Thorin. "But lock nor bar may hinder the homecoming spoken of old. Nor is this town in the wood realm. I speak to the master of the town of the men of the lake, not to the raftsmen of the king." Then the master hesitated and looked from one to the other. Then the Elping king was very powerful in those parts, and the master wished for no enmity with him. Nor did he think much of old songs, giving his mind of trade and trolls, to cargoes and gold, to which habit he owned his position. Others were so different mind, however, and quickly the matter was settled without him. The news had spread from doors of the hall like fire through the town. People were shouting inside the hall and outside it. The quays were thronged with hurrying feet. Some began to sing snatches of old songs concerning the return of the king under the mountains. That is, was Thor's grandson, not Thor himself, but had come back. Did not bother them at all. Others took up the song, and it rolled loud and high on the table. The king beneath the mountains, the king of the cavern stone, the lord of silver fountains shall come into its own. His king shall be upon, his harp shall be strung, his halls shall echo golden to songs of yore be sung. The woods shall wave on mountains and grass beneath the sun. His woes shall flow in the fountains, and the rivers grow golden run. The streams shall run in gladness, the lakes shall shine and burn. All sorrow and fail and sadness of the mountains kings return. So they sang or buried like that. Other there was a great deal more of it, and there was much shouting as well as the music of harps and of fiddles mixed up with it. Indeed, such excitement had not been known in the town in the memory of their oldest grandfather. The wood elves themselves began to wonder greatly and even to be afraid. They did not know, of course, how Thorin had escaped, and they began to think their king might have made a strong mistake. And as for the master of he saw there was nothing else for it but to obey the general clamor for the moment at any rate, and to pretend to believe that Thorin was what he said. So he gave up to him his own great chair, even set Philly Killy beside him in places of honor. Even Bilbo was given a seat at the high table, and no explanation of where he came. In no songs he had alluded him, even in the upscrubbed way was he from in the general bustle. Soon afterwards, the dwarves were brought into the town and scenes of astonishing enthusiasm. They were all doctored and fed and housed and pampered in the most delightfully and satisfying fashion. A large house was given up to Thorin and his company. Boats and rowers were put at their service, and crowds outside and sang songs all day. Or they cheered if any dwarf showed so much as his nose. Some of the songs were old ones, but some of them were quite new and spoke confidently of the sudden death of the dragon and of the cargoes. Sudden death of the cargoes of the rich presents coming down the river to the lake town. These were inspired largely by the master, and they did not particularly please the dwarves. But in the meantime, they were well content, and they quickly grew fat and strong again. Indeed, within a week, they were quite recovered, fitted out in fine cloths and their proper collars. With beards combed and trimmed and proud steps, Thorin walked as if his kingdom was already regained, and Smaug chopped up into little pieces. Then, as he had said, the dwarf's good feeling towards the hobbit grew stronger every day. They were no more groans or grumbles. They drank his health, and they patted him on the back, and they made a great fuss of him, which was just as well, for he was not breathing particularly cheerfully, and he had not forgotten to the look of the mountain, nor the thought of the dragon. And he had besides a shocking cold. For 3 days he sneezed and coughed, and he could not go out. Then, even after his speeches and banquets are limited to sag you very much. In the meanwhile, the wood elves had gone back up the forest river with their cargoes. And there was great excitement for the king's palace. I had never heard what happened to the chief of the guards of the butler. Nothing, of course, was ever said about keys or barrels while the dwarves had stayed in Lake Town, and Bilbo was careful never to become invisible. Still, I dare say, more was guessed than was known, though doubtlessly Mr. Baggins reminded of mystery in any case of the king. King now the dwarves, errand or thought he did, and he said to himself, "Very well, we'll see. No treasure will come back to Mirkwood without my having something to say in the matter. But I expect they will all come to a bad end, and serve them right." He at any rate did not believe in dwarves fighting and killing dragons like Smaug, and he strongly suspected attempt to burglary or something like it, which shows he was a wise elf and a wiser man, the man in the town, though not quite not quite right, as we shall see in the end. He sent out his spies about the shores of the lake, and as far northward towards the mountain as they would go, and waited. At the end of fortnight, Dolan began to think of departure. While the enthusiasm still lasted in the town, was the time to get help. It would not do for let anything cool down without delay. So he spoke to the master and his counselors, and he and his company must go on towards the mountain. Then, for the first time, the master was surprised and a little frightened. And he wondered if Thorin was after all really a descendant of the old kings. He had never thought that the dwarves would actually dare to approach Smaug, but believed there were frauds who would sooner or later be discovered and be turned on. He was wrong. Thorin, of course, was really the grandson of the king under the mountain, and there is no knowing what the dwarf would not dare and but do for the revenge of his recovery of his own. But the master was not sorry at all to let them go. They were expensive to keep, and their arrival had turned things into a long holiday, in which business was at standstill. Let them go and bother Smaug, and see how he welcomed them. He thought certainly old Thor's son, was what he said. You must claim your own. The hour in its hand. Spoken of old, what help we can offer shall be yours, and we trust your gratitude when the kingdom is regained. So one day, although autumn was now getting far on and winds were getting cold, and the leaves were falling fast, 3 large boats left Lake Town, laden with rowers, dwarves, Mr. Baggings, and many provisions, horses, ponies, and had been sent around by the circuitous paths to meet them at the appointed landing place. The master and his counselors bade them farewell from the great steps of the town hall. Then that went down to the lake. People sank on the quays out of their windows. The white oars dripped and splashed off. They went north up the lake. On the last stage of their long journey, the only person thoroughly unhappy was Bilbo.